malt whiskeys for the rest of the show. And we're going to go to Orchard House, which is the second, should be the second bottle in the second. What do you call these bottles?
Ah, statures.
Stature.
Thank you. Yeah. So
Stature. The second stature should be Orchard House.
John's asking what we're calling this, and it's not a miniature, because a miniature is what you get from a mini. Exactly, is what you get from other tasting clubs where you might get 3 CL or 5 CL. This is 10 CL. It's 4 measures, and so we're calling these statures. And one of our objectives is to have this in the Oxford English Dictionary in 20 years' time, just like Google is a verb now. So we're not the next one in your tasting box. The next stature is Orchard House.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Orchard House. Now we'll do malt whiskeys for the rest of the evening, as I said. This is a malt whiskey, a blended malt whiskey. What does that mean?
Are you asking me? Don't test me like that.
It means it's a blend of just single malt whiskeys, no grain whiskey in this one. And, you know, here's what I think blending is, guys. I think blending is magic. I think blending is magic. You take 2 things, in this case, 4 or 5 things, different single malt whiskeys from distilleries that many of you will know, and you combine them, you blend them together in a way that creates a balanced, interesting drink. And what have you done? You've created something that never existed before. You've created something that no single distillery can create. So that to me is kind of like magic. And I say that, you know, half seriously, a little jokey, but what I really mean is this is what blending is to us at Compass Box. It's a way to make something that never existed before. To me, that is kind of like magic. No one can make a compelling argument based on science that no one can make any argument based on science, but that single malts are somehow better than a blend of single malts. There's nothing there. They're the same product essentially. Just one happens to come from casks that were all distilled under one roof, and the other comes from casks that were distilled under, you know, several roofs, several places. But they're all malt whiskey. They're all made from malted barley. They're all distilled in copper pot stills to a certain strength. They're all aged in oak casks for a minimum of 3 years. They're the same product. Yes, they have very different flavor profiles across different single malt distilleries. No single malt distillery is exactly like another, which is part of the fascinating part of Scotch whiskey, but they are malt whiskey. And so what we're doing here with our blended malts is a little bit of magic. This piece of magic, called Orchard House, is a style that we call spirit forward. And I mean spirit. What I mean by spirit forward is the inherent spirit character of each of the single malt whiskeys that we've chosen for this recipe shine through. There's not a lot of heavy oakiness. Not like, remember the first one, hedonism, that vanilla? That's oak, yeah? When we get to the next one, Spice Tree, this is going to start to make even more sense for you, because that's quite heavily oak driven as well. Lots of different types of oak used there. This is letting the fruitiness of the malt whiskeys we've chosen here shine through, and thus the name Orchard House. Some of the single malts that we've chosen have an apple or kind of pear character to them, which you'll get as you nose the glass. You'll get even more if you add a little water to it.
So John, can you talk to us about adding water or ice? Again, this is a question that's been sent through beforehand by someone who can't join, and they said, should you add water? Should you add water? Should you chill with ice?
So here's the thing: do it your way. It's okay. And I suggest in a tasting that you do it in a consistent way, so you're understanding the whiskeys in a similar way. You're getting to know them in a similar way. So if you're going to add water, add a little bit of water to each one, and roughly the same amount, or exactly the same amount if you're measuring. That's okay to add. It's absolutely okay. It's absolutely okay to do it at the bottling stream. It's up to you. The only thing I would strongly suggest is, if you're not accustomed to whiskey tastings or spirits tastings for that matter, I would highly suggest you add water to each one before you take. You might nose it as is, You might even taste a little bit, but then add water and really get to know it. If you're not used to spirits tastings or whiskey tastings, and maybe you've done a wine tasting before, well, you're going from like a 12 or 13% alcoholic beverage to 40 or 43 or 46%. It's a totally different kind of experience, and it takes a little getting used to. So it's okay to add water. And as I said earlier, ice is, tasting like this, ice isn't, we don't offer ice usually because it kind of starts to chill down the whiskey and sort of mute the flavors a little bit. However, when you're drinking whiskey and not just tasting whiskey, like we might be doing, say, after this, on a warm night, adding ice makes complete sense because it makes that whiskey so much more enjoyable. Yeah, maybe the flavors are a little muted, but on balance, it's a much more enjoyable experience than drinking 30-degree whiskey. So Orchard House, Spirit Forward. I'm not going to go into all the geeky detail of each recipe, but what I will tell you is that every single recipe we have ever created for Compass Box, whether it's part of our core range like these, or it's one of our limited editions, many limited editions that we've done over the 23 years, we publish the recipe. We share the recipe. So you'll see on our website for every single whiskey we're tasting tonight, every single whiskey we've ever made, you'll find these really geeky pie charts that tell you exactly to a percentage point the portion of each whiskey in the recipe, the distillery named. There's a few distilleries we don't name because they would rather we not, but over 95% of them we name. We tell you the type of cask it was aged in, because that's really important. Different cask types give different kinds of flavors to whiskey. We've discovered already American oak gives a lovely vanilla character. We're about to discover the next whiskey that heavy toasted French oak gives more of a spice character. If we had some sherry cask aged whiskeys here tonight, we'd see that they give a different kind of set of flavors altogether as well. So knowing the cask type will give you an indication of what flavors to expect. And we until we got in trouble with the Scotch Whisky Association years ago, we also told you the age of each of the components. And now, long story, not for a 40-minute tasting, but you can read about it online somewhere or on our website. Yeah, we got in trouble for being too open, too transparent. And there's a weird law out there that says you can only talk about the age of the youngest spirit in the blend. But if you, for those who are eagle-eyed, you can probably figure out how to understand the ages of the whiskeys on these pie charts. I'm just going to leave it at that. It's a little puzzle for everybody to kind of figure out after the tasting.
And if you can't figure it out, let me know, and
reveal the answer.
In a closed session, we'll reveal the answer.
Anyway, but age, we're open about everything because you have a right to know. You have a right to know, and the more you know about the background of these products, I'm a wine geek still, and I'm sure some of you are, and the more you know about that producer's methods and philosophies, the more you will you come to enjoy and appreciate those products, and perhaps even respect the producer. So Orchard House, hopefully, you know what? I forgot to tell you, don't wait for me to taste. I'm not going to give you the command. From here on out, you go when you're ready, because I'll keep talking. So, yeah. I describe this, generally speaking, as a light to medium intensity in terms of its aroma. In terms of malt whiskeys out there in the world, light to medium intensity, very nice sort of summertime kind of malt whiskey. And we describe these in the industry. I'm James Saxon, my whiskey maker. We describe the malt whiskeys we used here, the Clynelish malt whiskey, the malt whiskey from the Linkwood distillery, as fruity. You might get some notes that remind you of orchard fruits like pears and apples, and amongst other things. There is light vanilla in there. There's a little bit of light oak spice, which I describe it as sort of like, maybe it's like sort of light allspice or something in there, which is coming from the types of casks we've aged this in. Primarily American oak casks, a little bit of sherry cask in here, and a tiny bit of French oak cask in here. And there's something actually really interesting. At about 2% of this recipe, there's heavy, peaty, smoky whiskey in here, but you probably don't taste it. Most people don't unless you have very sensitive sense of taste. And it's in there because it just gives this underlying little buzz to the recipe. It's just that little bit more interesting, a little bit of electricity. That's Orchard
That's
House.
the spot. Wonderful.
The next one will be Spice Tree, right? Any questions on Orchard House we want to address
Yeah,
now,
please
or?
send the questions through on chat. I think we've answered the one already about, here we go. So is Compass Box distilling some of its own, or is it 100% a blending house? Well,
that's a great question. Yeah, today we are a blending house. We are buying whiskeys from different distilleries across Scotland. We fill casks with what we call new make spirit from different distilleries every single year. We've owned about just over 50,000, or just about 50,000 casks, depending on how our fillings have been going the last several weeks. It might be over 50,000 casks right now, which sounds like a big number perhaps, but it's tiny in the industry. It's tiny in the industry. We do have some thoughts about distilling in the future, but those are just in the idea phase at this point. So.